Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max.
Welcome, everyone. We are the Geek Patrol, and our microphones don't have a stun setting. I'm Joe Thorderson, here with my friends Brandon Olmstead and Alan Gilbreth, and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And we have to start the show by saying, happy anniversary, guys. It's been 10 years. Yesterday was our 10-year anniversary of doing Geek Tank Radio.
A decade.
I think your microphone should have had a stun setting 10 years ago.
Nobody brought a cake. Nobody brought anything. Does anybody know?
I brought coffee.
Okay.
I was gonna say
just another day of business here.
Yeah, we don't stand on ceremony, Joe.
That's true.
We sit.
Yeah.
Sit.
But you guys, I was just reflecting what a transformational period of geekdom this has been. We came into Geek Tank Radio, and the world of geekdom was one way, and it's very changed now.
Oh,
some
yeah.
of it for the better, some of it not so
Not
much.
really.
But with that in mind, you guys, this is a perfect day to do some bonus content. So if you notice on the timestamp here, this is a much longer episode of Geek Tank Radio, because at the later in the show, we're going to basically do what we call as unplugged, or a retrospection.
Yeah. We're gonna unpack the history and our favorite moments.
So we're reviewing crime footage.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's the rest of my job. Why not do it here?
I'm just trying to make sure I got the right footage lined up.
Oh, yeah.
Max has been quietly involved in Geek Tank longer than people might realize, too. So that we may even tease that a little bit.
No.
We're
gonna let Max remain a mystery, because I think that's what gets the people all excited about it.
There's been many people that have come and gone over the years, too, and we'll probably salute some of them as well.
Yep.
So stay tuned. That's going to come up at the later in the show. So I'm really interested. You talked about something called CinemaCon that I've never heard of.
I can't believe you've never heard of CinemaCon.
Maybe I have, and I don't know the name of it, but is it happening this weekend?
Oh, no. It happened over the course of this past week.
Okay, so CinemaCon, I'm going to get educated in that.
You're going to get educated, sir.
But before we do any of that, you guys, did we lose a legend? I mean, I think he is a legend, right?
Absolutely.
In Hollywood. Val Kilmer.
That is the definition of a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was
when
trying
you can so clearly identify an actor, a good role or a bad role, it doesn't matter. Val Kilmer flat out delivered.
He
Every
did
time.
both.
What's really weird is my favorite role of his, which is in Real Genius. I anytime that movie comes on, I'm watching it.
I gotta watch it. I completely forgot. I knew I liked it. I just don't remember what it's about. So.
Right? Yeah. Well, kids that are too smart for their own good. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah.
But
with a laser.
But the one movie that I had forgotten about, like it was, I remember seeing it once I was reminded, was Top Secret, and that's his first feature film role, first lead in a major film.
Oh,
and it's
Top
so
Secret.
bad.
It is,
but it's supposed to be. It's a parody of spy movies.
It's like an airplane version of a spy movie. I forgot about that, and that was we're talking early 80s, right?
And the thing is it's like, praise be to Google TV. I turned on my TV the other day, and it's like, boom! It's the recommended thing on the main page, and I'm like going, I had forgotten all about it.
Yeah, because everything's popping up. Val Kilmer, all the movies that he should. But Real Genius didn't pop up on the menu. I wonder where you can watch it.
That's a really good
go
question.
To Amazon or something, because I was gonna go back and watch.
I can go watch it on a disc at my house, but
Yeah. But Alan, I know you probably have a favorite role of Val's, right?
Oh yeah, it's Brad Mardigan.
Okay, who's
Mad
that?
Mardigan.
Yeah. He had. It's kind of a Brad Pitt thing going on.
But that's the thing. You kind of know everybody, so you give them an actual name.
I know.
Half the people you refer to, that's not even their real name.
I know. Well, it was the movie Willow, which was,
of course,
a fantasy derivative. Hey, everybody in that movie went on to be all your favorite characters in lots of other movies.
Yeah.
Including the gentleman playing Willow.
Right.
He has been in, I think, everything ever since.
Yeah, it's like pretty much anytime you needed a short-statured individual, You got
that wasn't Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
Well, because nobody knew what a Peter Dinklage was back when Warwick Davis was rocking everything.
Well,
But-
we wouldn't have a good Leprechaun
That's true.
without Warwick.
But
he
we're trying to
played
talk about,
the world's greatest swordsman with a predicate for being in trouble.
A lot.
Basically, the whole movie, he is in trouble doing something until the very, very end where he redeems everything. But I don't know. When you watched Val Kilmer in a movie, no matter what it was, comedy, serious, airplanes, whatever, he always looked like he was the one having fun.
He never seemed to be. It's like you can always tell someone's demeanor when they're on a job. And the thing about an actor is you're supposed to make sure that you're the character, you're in there. But he always did. It's like even in movies where it's obvious that his character is going through hell, he seems to be having a blast.
Huh. That's interesting you say that.
And one of my favorite roles in which you can definitely tell is when he played Simon Templar in The Saint.
Yes.
The Saint. What was that movie? Because I'm trying to remember.
All right,
Spy movie.
So Elizabeth,
not a spoof.
Elizabeth Shue plays a scientist who's cracked the code for cold fusion.
Okay.
And he has been hired to steal it, but then he falls in love with her, so he helps her give it to the world. And there's Russian, oligarchs and gangsters and disguises and just fun.
Okay. I'm surprised you guys didn't lead with. How come nobody's talking about Jim Morrison? He played Jim Morrison.
He
in The
did an
Doors.
amazing job as Jim Morrison, but The Doors is not a fun movie to watch.
Well, all the living members of The Doors renounced that movie, but I don't know if they renounced it because of him. I think it was more they didn't like Oliver Stone's depiction
because
he took a lot of liberties. And
I would say he probably told the truth, and that upset them. It hit a little too close to home.
I don't know, though. But that one, whenever I think of Val Kilmer, that's one of the first roles I think of because, I mean, he sure looked like him.
Oh, he once again,
he got in the part.
He lost himself in the role.
Well, let's pick on The Doors for 1 second and kind of go.
We want to talk about how Val Kilmer is the opposite of Nicolas Cage.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to do all that. Settle down, gentlemen, when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. After tuning into this show, the Men in Black wipe their own memories. The Geek Patrol is back.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Brandon Olmsted and Alan Gilbreth and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, we should let you know this is our 10-year anniversary of Geek Tank Radio, and that's why you might have noticed if you're listening via podcast that this episode is a lot longer. So if you're listening live here on 98.1 The Max, we appreciate that, but go back later and you're going to hear some bonus content. So, but before the break, we were paying tribute to Val Kilmer, who Brandon said something just as the clock ran out about Val Kilmer being the opposite of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
All right, so you go into a Nick Cage movie.
Yeah.
You know it's Nick Cage. The character he plays is what would Nick Cage be like if he had this job? If Nick Cage was a part of the Freemasons and trying to steal the Declaration of Independence, you've got National Treasure. If Nick Cage was a centuries-old magician who'd been stuck in an urn, you've got The Sorcerer's Apprentice. If Nick Cage was a mute janitor who fought robots, you've got Willy's Wonderland. But it's always Nick Cage. Now, you go into a Val Kilmer movie, and you know it's Val Kilmer. You see him, you know it's him. Within 15 minutes of that movie, he's the character. And you don't think about him being Val Kilmer again until the credits roll.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because I really thought I thought he got in the role of Jim Morrison pretty well. He looked the part. Now, like I said, I don't know all the ins and outs with Jim Morrison other than he was a high maintenance guy. He caused a lot of grief to people around him. So, I mean, in the movie, that's what they portrayed.
And you know, when we come across an anniversary of that movie or a big anniversary about like Jim Morrison's death, we'll discuss The Doors all day long.
Yeah.
I don't want to focus on that because, again, we're trying to focus on a guy. We already got off on a Warwick Davis tangent. We're getting off on another tangent. Let's bring it back to Val.
Okay.
Well, he had a great progression because they kind of portrayed him as a comedy actor.
Right.
And then his next role was a Roger Moore derivative.
Yep.
And then his next one is a biopic.
Yeah.
His next one's a fantasy. Then he rolls over to Heat. So there's one.
That was a good movie.
There's another really good movie that doesn't get a lot of attention.
It's a very good movie, and I know we're going to discuss it later on, but at CinemaCon they let us know that the script for Heat 2 is done. I don't know who's playing the characters, but
they're all kind of old.
Al
Pacino.
There's like 30 years between the two novels. It's not like they could make the sequel based on the second novel, without the novel being made. The author is very like that. Anyway, back to Val. He's Batman. And while you give him grief because that is probably that is not the worst Batman. It's one, but
probably second worst.
But even no, not even.
George Clooney's
is not.
Oof.
George Clooney's isn't even the worst in my personal opinion.
Okay.
I have a question related to that. Would you say that Val Kilmer's Batman got superseded by the fact that Jim Carrey was at the height of his power then, and so
it is 100% a Jim Carrey, Joel Schumacher problem.
Yeah,
because I think Val's Batman could have been iconic if they hadn't leaned into Jim Carrey's physical comedy as the Riddler. Which, while yes, Frank Gorshin jumped around and everything in the old 60s Batman TV show, the Riddler has never been like the Riddler is almost debonair.
Oh, good point.
He is the smug intellectual.
Yeah. Yep.
Alan.
Okay. There you go.
Now, we go from all these over-the-top performances, and then we wander into Tombstone.
Oh, Doc Holliday, right?
And he is actually
such a good movie.
An understated character with some of the most powerful, quietly spoken drop lines.
I'll be a Huckabee.
Huckleberry.
Huckleberry. He just, there are just lines where as he turned his head, that was an entire line of dialogue.
You knew that what was about to be said was something you had to hear. You get quiet when Doc Holliday comes on the screen there. And again, it's another one of those where he gets so lost in the role, you don't think about it as being one of his movies until someone else mentions it.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell is totally Kurt Russell. Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth, Michael. Why can I not remember his name right now? But he plays Johnny Ringo. That whole movie, James Coburn's in that movie. I mean, it's amazing.
Everybody's there.
But such lines like when Billy Bob Thornton comes up on him and he's gonna shoot him for throwing him out of the casino, the bar, and then he stops him. It's like, and then after discussing things with Kurt Russell, God, why can I not remember Wyatt Earp's name when I need it?
Oh, there you go.
When he goes and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you were there. You may go now. And then Billy Bob Thornton, all right, he puts his gun down and leaves. That's it.
I enjoyed the power that he brought to the screen, and of course, Top Gun 1 and 2.
And as much as I love Maverick, that scene between Maverick and Iceman when he can't really speak, but there's so much emotion just right there between the two of them. And Val's had throat cancer. He's had multiple surgeries. He's not in the best of health. And he's still the most powerful character in that whole friggin' movie.
In the second, yeah. Yep. Well, it's interesting, too. You don't pigeonhole him at all. He's like, you can't say, well, he's a comedian or he's an action hero or he's whatever. It seems like he would take on any kind of movie with any kind of budget, with any kind of theme.
When it comes to Hollywood, he's a Renaissance man. He can play what you bring him.
Yeah.
Or could.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
And he will be missed.
Yeah, very, very interesting. It's I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't wait around till somebody passes away to celebrate their life either, because there's a lot of really interesting performers out there.
I'm thinking of people like Willem Dafoe in terms of the level of versatility and charisma that they bring to the screen.
Yeah, some people just they have a presence and they even in his illness, because he just did a movie that came out and he used what he had. He actually leaned into his health problems to make the character better. So.
That reminds me of an episode of MASH where Winchester is trying to help console this pianist who lost control of his right hand and show that, hey, he could still do stuff even with his impairments.
There you go. So Val Kilmer, you will be missed.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
Also, they told me you guys look like dorks.
They look like dorks. Oh boy.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Brandon Olmsted and Alan Gilbreth and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And in a minute, we're going to talk about CinemaCon. I'm going to get educated because I don't really know what it is. But Alan, you were saying something off the air. I just want to wrap up because we were paying tribute to Val Kilmer, and you were talking about the fact that in some roles, like in Tombstone, he's about to deliver a line of dialogue, but before he does, he slowly turns his head and looks at the camera. And I think that's a very important feature of really good actors. Like I'm thinking of Leonard Nimoy. He used to say, well, Mr. Spock, he was portrayed a certain way so that even raising an eyebrow became a big deal.
Yeah.
That was a physical bit of acting, and some people neglect it. They focus on their lines and they don't realize that they're still acting,
Well,
when they're moving with body movements. And
another
like that.
one that's not one of his big movies was like The Ghost in the Darkness. And in that, you had
So much
very
sweat.
long periods of time where he's acting, he's aiming the gun, and you're having to watch this poor guy go through all of the machinations of, trying to kill this lion that's eating everybody he knows. And he's having nightmares, and you just watched him get to the point where he delivered the line or the action. And that was as powerful as what he ultimately said or did.
I think that's true with any
Just
of them. That's
absolutely stunning physical acting.
And that speaks to good writing, too, where you're allowing that. You got to allow a little pause. You got to allow a little silence. So, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was a good point you made. But Brandon, what is CinemaCon, and how do I not know what it is?
Okay, all right.
So,
Well, here's why you don't know about it, Joe.
Okay.
You're not chronically online, and you're not a theater owner.
Oh, you got to be a theater
Movie theater.
Okay.
In order to attend, you need to be associated with the movie theater.
Okay.
Every so often, they bring in a handful of critics and whatnot, but you can't trust critics. So they're
everybody's a critic these days, anyway. Literally.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. Well, we're critics technically, but not as much.
I'm not a film critic. I just like movies.
Okay.
But all right, Caesar's Palace Coliseum, mass production going on there from this whole week. It was I think Monday through Thursday. All the different studios were doing everything they could to convince theater owners to house their movies, to license their movies, to show their movies. And all the big studios were there. Even Amazon was there because, they own MGM now. They're going to do the new Bond movies. So we were getting people who were reporting on things we weren't going to be able to see yet. And then, of course, they would, a few days later, they would drop trailers, they'd drop footage. But CinemaCon is the biggest, it's a convention for theater owners, so they can determine what they're going to schedule in their theaters for the rest of the year.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. It's just like any other convention. You could have an air conditioning convention. You could have any type of, and they all get together.
I don't want to slam Comic-Con or any of our conventions that we do, the genre and fandom cons. This is a convention.
Yeah,
it is literally.
This is getting business done, right?
Okay, this is business.
Okay.
All right, let's just talk about ticket price.
Yeah.
If you're a non-member, it was $1,650 to get in the door.
Yeah.
So who was going to this? Like
there's people in the industry.
People in the industry. People who want to know what's coming up, what they're going to be competing against, what they are going to be able to showcase. And while you don't hear a whole lot about it, they also do a lot of presentations on new technology for your theater, new surround sound
That's
stuff.
what I wonder.
How am I going to get you in this theater?
Here's the latest popcorn maker that cranks it out. And
here's the latest stadium seats.
Right.
Here's what they can do. Here's where we can put in fans on them so they keep them cool while you keep the theater warm so people are comfortable. All that weird technical stuff. But what we love about it as geeks, we love the technology, sure. But we don't care about how they present it to those guys. What we like about CinemaCon is that you get to see stuff about movies that is being held back. Like, you get to find out stuff that's coming before it's coming. Like, we now know that Ice Cube has finalized a deal for last Friday, which, if you like the Friday series,
I don't know.
They're doing a final one.
Yeah. Ice Cube.
But, you also got to see things like, there was a 4.5-minute sneak peek from Superman, which is airing. It's now airing in front of Minecraft, which opened on Friday. You had a presentation where they brought out folks who were involved in Avengers Doomsday. Nobody you haven't heard about so far, but people who are there to kind of like jazz up. It's like, this is we've started filming, we're in production, this is what we got going on. Here's when our filming dates and everything, and then we go into post production. They talk more about the technicals of it, but then you got people like Zoe Saldana who come out and they give you a presentation and show footage for Avatar: Fire and Ash.
Okay, but hang on, because you're making me think of this. Because, like, okay, I've been to a convention involving contracting, right? And they'll say, this is not for public consumption, but you should know that this new type of such and such is coming out on the market and whatever. Right. Well, is there stuff like that? Like, there's behind closed doors events and things like that?
A few years back on Geek Tank Radio, we talked about the new giant OLED screens that are basically, rather than projecting on, it projects from behind, and then you've got the giant screen. It's basically a big TV screen.
Okay.
Instead of your traditional theater screens. Now they were like $175,000 a piece at the time, but of course as time goes on they'll get cheaper. But that's when they would debut stuff like that, is at CinemaCon. And the movies they rolled out to show you, I think in one of the the Universal presentation, they actually did a full presentation of the live action How to Train Your Dragon for the audience. They got to watch the whole movie, and it's getting great reviews from people who are going to be showcasing it in their theaters.
Oh, well, that's important.
Right.
So, okay.
And they put out so much information on the various things. It's like there's footage from the new Masters of the Universe. We got new horror movies all over the place, and a couple of trailers we'll talk about when we get back.
Okay. Looking forward to talking more about CinemaCon when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson, here with my friends Brandon Olmsted and Alan Gilbreth, and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, we're learning about what happened at CinemaCon last week, which I didn't know anything about it, but it turns out it's a convention for movies, movie theater owners. The public's invited, but it's expensive. It's like $1,600 But and you're talking about some of the movies coming out and everything, and
you think it'd be a lot for stuff that's coming out soon, and it is, but they also give you little bits and bites for stuff that's coming out in the coming years. I mean, Sony did a presentation about a set of movies they've got that's not coming out until 2028, and that is the Beatles biopics, which is what Sony is referring to as the first theatrical bingeable event. Or bingeable theatrical. I don't know how they put it, but that's what they call it.
What does that mean?
So it's 4 separate movies about the Beatles.
All in a row?
And they're all going to be they're all going to hit theaters at the same time. You'll be able to go and see all 4 movies, and it basically each one of those movies is told is from the perspective of each of the characters.
Oh, interesting. Okay, now
they brought out the actors that they've got playing it, to introduce who's playing who. And I was very shocked to see that that there's 2 Marvel actors involved in it. Joseph Quinn and Barry Keoghan. Barry Keoghan was in Eternals, and Joey Quinn is playing Human Torch in the new Fantastic Four movie. Which they showed some new stuff from that while they were there. But yeah, Alan brought it up off air, so we're gonna have to talk about it now. they showed Liam Neeson exercising his comedic chops.
It's funny, you don't think of him as a comedian, but he can do comedy. If
in a sequel or a requel to The Naked Gun, where he is Frank Drebin Jr.
Okay, I was about to say, who wants to try to fill those shoes? Because I mean,
there's a scene in the trailer where he is talking to the plaque of his father at police squad, and he's talking about how he wants to, he wants to live up to his, and then it shows this guy, and he's like, "I love you, Dad," and it's like, it's Frank's partner, and then the captain, and it goes down, and you see this whole row of cops on their knee talking to the memorial for their family, and you get down to the end, and there's the guy, and it shows Norbert O.J. Simpson, and it goes, it focuses back on the his son, and he just shakes his head. He's like,
ain't doing it.
So,
right.
Is he going to have an accent? Is he going to have an American accent, or is he?
Well, I mean, he's doing his gruff.
He sounds like Liam.
Yeah, his normal gruff voice.
He always keeps the same voice.
Now, keep in mind, Liam is following the advice of Leslie Nielsen, who said when somebody asked, goes, you used to be the leading man, now you're a comedic actor.
Yeah,
and he goes, well, I don't know what happened. I used to walk out, and people would swoon and listen to everything I said. Now I walk out and say the exact same line, and everybody dies laughing. So
you crossed that threshold.
That is, he just went, I don't know what happened, but I'm still working. And so he wasn't going to argue.
And the thing is, it throws you off because you know what trailer you're going because you clicked on it. You know it's The Naked Gun. And it starts off grim, gritty, and you're like, oh God, they ruined enough. And then they swerve you, and you get the comedy right then and there, and you're like, oh, man.
Are they going to start with all new characters, or are they bringing back Lisa Marie?
I was going to say
not Lisa.
Priscilla.
Priscilla Presley.
I'm pretty sure that we're probably not going to see many cameos from the original, seeing as how many of them are no longer with us.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be surprised if we see her as his mom.
Well, I was going to say, that's what I'm wondering who the mother is.
It's again, I was reminded of something this week that I hope the cinema gets. And CinemaCon reminded me of it again, looking at the screens. There are times where we don't care. We really don't. We just don't care. We just want to be entertained.
Right.
I saw an anime recently that was actually just entertaining. Yeah. Who cares? Who cares about the physics? Who cares about just entertain me? Right. And I'm looking at I'm looking at Liam here, who has been an amazing actor for 40 years now? 30 years?
First thing I remember seeing him in was Krull.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's 83?
80, so we're 40, we're 40 years into this. And now he's making a movie that has no redemptive value at all, other than the fact it's going to be entertaining. Yeah.
We hope.
And honestly, that's what we need more of in the theater.
That's some big shoes to fill, though, those movies.
It's true.
Because even the sequels weren't as good.
But, last week on the show, we talked about the fact that a lot of movies nowadays take themselves too seriously, and in doing so, they lose the heart. Well, some of the stuff I see coming out of CinemaCon this year, it's almost like people knew what I was talking about already. Yeah. And the things that are going to drive people back to the theater are going to be things like How to Train Your Dragon in live action. Strangely enough, after seeing the trailer for Megan 2.0, I'm like going, I'm going to see it.
Might have to go watch this one.
Now, what's interesting, you're not talking at all about the latest technology and stuff, which is fine with me. I don't need seats that shake.
Well, that's the thing. They won't release those reports until probably a couple of weeks because there's always an embargo on reviews.
Okay.
But when it comes to studio showcases, people start leaking things.
Okay. Can you see footage of this? Because I'm kind of curious to see.
No.
So there's no cameras allowed.
The only people who are allowed to film their presentations are the studios themselves to show their shareholders.
Right,
and if they decide to release it later on, they will.
And I got to say, one of my favorite tidbits was the Thing trying the sauce.
Yeah, I knew you'd like that.
Well, but
they spent way too long on that.
No, they didn't. It actually made it relatable.
Okay. Well, the Fantastic Four. Okay. Anyway, well, you guys, happy anniversary, and it's time to get out of here. However, when you turn to our digital side, we've got all sorts of bonus content where we're going to reflect on our 10-year anniversary. But for the moment, we're going to say goodbye. So until next week, we are the Geek Patrol, and I am Joe Thorderson.
I'm Alan Gilbreth.
I'm Maximilian.
And I am Brandon Olmstead, completely depressed that Joe ruined my sizzle.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
I didn't steal it. I made that item. Made it with the magic that I stole.
And welcome to Geek Tank Radio's bonus digital content. You're not hearing this on the net, technically.
One of these days, I'm going to have to teach you how to do that.
Okay.
Tease digital formatting.
How do we do that? What's a good way to do that?
Okay, you don't refer to it as digital formatting or bonus footage. It's always check out our podcast. Check us out on YouTube or check us out online for additional content.
And okay,
yeah.
I mean, we're big believers in doing everything in one take. So we could have just started over and done this again, but we're not going to do that.
We're transparent with our audience. We like them.
So you guys
give them the look inside.
Translation: We're scared to press too many buttons.
Right.
That's true. We don't want to go out over the air live because.
Well,
your boy Brandon sometimes says the wrong word.
So you guys, yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of Geek Tank Radio, which, I mean, in some ways it feels like we just got started. In other ways, it feels like we've been doing this for decades. But I don't know. You know what? Just right out of the gate, I want to just say something.
Okay.
I've always loved our intro music.
Oh, God.
Remember when we were workshopping that, and the problem is when you're looking for music for a show, there's thousands to choose from, and this one we all agreed on. It had a cool hook that we like. So
it just felt right.
Yeah, it fits the motif. But do we have to give a history or?
No, we don't have to give a history. We just need to talk about how much we enjoy doing what we do for the people, and talk about some of our favorite moments. I mean, and if anybody needs to drop out before we're all done, then that's just how it goes.
Okay, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I can't get my nap?
So.
No, you can't get your nap, Alan. You're working the board.
That's why.
What people don't seem to understand is that our buddy Max actually has a job. We're just yammering away. So sometimes he has to go do the actual work, and then he gives Alan control of the board.
Oh, that's true.
That's scary.
Well, you know what's interesting, you guys? We started off as a paid show, basically, where we paid to be on the air, but that only lasted 6 months because they liked what we did. And then we were starting to it switched to it where we were getting paid, which I always appreciated.
What I always find funny is that where we started off, we had the opportunity, and this is back in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We don't really need to mention the old studios, but we did the whole thing for 6 months, and we were having fun.
Yeah.
And then Joe got the opportunity to interview one of the presidential candidates at the time and made a whole lot of money for a whole lot of people but it's like we didn't get any of the credit for that.
We got left out of the math. That's true. Yeah, that's right. I mean, so that was a big
that person
deal.
did not end up winning the primary or going on, but
But you got, what I was just thinking about though is a lot of people have come and gone, but at the heart of it, it's always just been the three of us that have done Geek Tank Radio.
I would like to take a moment to talk about some of those moments with those other people that just kind of defined a moment. A gentleman who was actually a part of the MCFC with us, Thomas Duke, and the fact that he thought the line from The Dark Knight was "I don't wear hockey pants."
Gosh, I was hoping we buried that one. You guys thought that was really funny for some reason.
Because he said it with such seriousness, and it's just like everybody in the room went quiet. Because everybody knew Thomas was a good kid.
Yeah.
And through him and Alyssa Diggs, who, has been in and out of the show for 10 years, and we've just sent her off on a new adventure, in her life.
Right.
Laura Johnson, who, went around the world on a grant to study geekdom abroad and kept the show going with us by giving us updates and reports from some of the weirdest places.
Yeah. And Brandon's not kidding. She was given a $30,000 grant, and you had to travel around the world. You couldn't come back to America.
You had to stay gone for like a full year. Yeah.
She got a lot of cool interviews. She went to Japan. She went to all over Europe, the Czech Republic.
She got dengue fever and hospitalized, and she got stuck on an island searching for Legos at high tide, and just some of the stuff she did. I mean, I will always be jealous of her adventures.
And the CinemaCon, Wayne and Tannen.
Wayne Camp, Tannen Van Horn. And of course, that would eventually lead to Jeff Harris and Sarah Luca and all, the CinemaCon brought an air to the Geek Tank world that, we didn't necessarily step into, but they broadened the horizons.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments actually with you, Joe, was when we went to the basement studio for the CinemaCon. And it's like taking your best friend to a club they don't want to be at, and then seeing them just blossom.
Your field studio where it was like in a garage or something like that. So but a lot of people have no clue what we're talking about, I guess.
But it's okay. They get to listen to us as we reminisce.
And our buddy Brody Scott, who basically stole us from the other, he wanted us on his station.
Yeah,
people were starting to fight over us, which was a nice feeling.
It was weird because like you said, we came in as a paid show, and it was just me, you, and Alan all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we, eventually, Brody got in there, and he was like, I could do so much more with you if I brought you over here, and Jay didn't really want to give us up, but at the same time, he was being pulled in 14 different directions, so he really couldn't, hold on to us. So we've been an on-the-air show. We've been a podcast. We spent some time in limbo with a whole new name, and and then of course we got to give a lot of credit to Ditch because we were in limbo for a while there.
And Danny Bruns, Ditch and Danny.
And then, of course, once Danny found out that we were over here, she was very much like, but I want them.
Right. But it's nice. I mean, and people have said that Geek Tank has a very good energy, and we're always trying to be optimistic. We don't get into the sewer. Even when we do, I think we keep it, positive.
It's like when we have to report on the negatives, because there comes a time when you can't just ignore it or you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
But we've tried our best to keep the positive light on geekdom, even when geekdom itself wants to mire itself in the slime.
Yeah, it could very easily. It's funny, shows like this could easily get political, or they could get preachy, or commercial and annoying. Oh. Like every 2 seconds interrupting with, by the way, we're brought to you by this whatever. So I mean,
I know we joke about it a lot, but we do try our best not to promote ourselves as too much. And I guess I don't know if it's out of humbleness or out of self-deprecation, where we think, oh, people don't really care what we're doing. But trust me, guys, if anybody wants to pay us to go commercial, we will. But at the same time, it's just, it doesn't feel as genuine.
Yeah. Alan, you haven't said anything. I'm waiting.
Well, y'all were doing fine.
Your mic's on.
I'm just over here cruising along. Basically, 10 years of doing any one thing, you would think would get repetitive, but we have been through. We've been through a lot of, let's just say, industry changes. The industry has definitely shifted and changed and wandered back and forth over the last 10 years.
Right.
Oddly, the three of us are still here every weekend. We still get together.
I mean, I'll admit that
we still wander in, and we all still have something we just saw or just heard about or saw last night on YouTube, or there's always something new to chat about.
I love the fact that, it's like, and I know we've all had those moments where it's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And, because sometimes.
we're not getting rich off this.
Right,
that's for sure.
I mean, and, sometimes the fight for, we talked about sponsors. Sometimes the fight for sponsors alone is hard. And you're just wondering, it's like, all right, we could do so much for this business, or we could do, it's like, hey, we can come out and do these things for you. And I love the fact that, when we came over to work for 98.9 originally, when we came to Cumulus, and it was pretty much I mean, weren't we the first show to air when everything changed over from the Bridge to the Roar?
I think we were about the first. Yeah,
Yes,
it was either
we
that or
were
2 o'clock.
actually the Inception show.
We
There
had.
you go.
It's like
So we were there from the ground up.
We
Yeah.
we were on the hook for a while beforehand, and we had to be quiet about it.
Right.
It's like because contractually somebody else had the had the bid in to be the one to announce the change.
Yeah.
And we've worked with them, and it's been so much fun. It's like for a minute there, it was like all subterfuge and like spy, and it's like we've got a secret, and it we're on digital. I'm not going to get blue, but we really pissed some people off with that. And some friendships were shaken because I wouldn't tell people what was going on.
Yeah, we had to sign a what do they call that?
An NDA.
A non-disclosure thing.
Yeah.
Which I've never signed before. It made me feel kind of like, wow, maybe we're reaching
we felt
a new
important.
level here. So, yeah. But, at the heart of it, I just do think we should at least just say, because a lot of people, maybe they're new to Geek Tank Radio, this whole thing started because it was an outgrowth of the convention. We were saying, because we would go on television or radio to promote the convention a few weeks beforehand, and I'm like, why couldn't we have a show that we could use it as a vehicle to promote? And at the same time, Alan, you had a store that you wanted to promote, and I'm like, and then, but why make it a commercial? Why not make the show super entertaining and then sneak in the promotion?
Exactly.
Which is what we did, which is why,
And I've been asked many times over the years, it's like, why did y'all try and get into radio? Nobody listens to terrestrial radio anymore. I have numbers that prove you wrong, and I've had numbers for 10 years that have steadily grown worldwide. And when Alan tells us about new listeners at a military base in Guam or 14 separate locations in the Philippines and stuff, and I'm like going, hey, somebody's out there listening.
Well,
it's steady.
You guys remember this, and it was fun. I've been, we've all been to radio stations or TV stations to promote, but. And then when it turned into a thing, doing it every week, here's what I noticed. You come in, for one thing, we didn't have a pass key. We always had to have somebody come let us in.
Right.
We didn't even rank. We didn't even rank that. We're paying them every week. We took turns. Remember, Alan? You would go pay, then I'd pay, and then we were, gauging whether it was worth the money we were spending. But here's what I remember, you guys. The first few weeks, people are like, okay, and then they're here's go over there, go record your thing. Then I would notice as we're recording, people would start stopping and sticking and looking through the window at us. And then about 5 or 6 weeks in, we had fellow people from other stations knocking on the door. Hey, can I jump in on this segment here? I mean, that's how Jake got.
Yeah,
and suddenly everybody was sort of gravitating towards it because they're like, wait, these guys are doing fun things.
Well, one of the big ones was Star Wars.
Yeah, and then we're in the middle of when the new Star Wars sequels
everybody
were coming
wanted
out.
to jump in to give their take.
Right. And it was fun. We were like, because we're all positivity and we're doing fun topics because they're talking about serious world events and we're in there talking about Star Wars.
I think one of the funnest things that I remember from that first studio, that first year or so that we were on the air, was getting a chance to we got a chance to talk with the Cartoonists Association.
That's right.
We did, I don't know how many different interviews we had with them, but then that gave us the opportunity to go to the big gala benefit that they were doing at St. Jude.
Yeah.
And it was me, you, and Chance Raspberry that went to do it. And it was something I would have never seen myself as being a part of.
And these were really famous cartoons.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like you got legends from like Mad Magazine, people who've been doing comic strips for, 20, 30 years. Then
I got to finally meet Jeff Smith, who did Bone. Because I've always liked that guy.
And then we're there with, I know that a lot of people think about Memphis and we don't think about, Memphis dignitaries, but you've got the upper echelon of Memphis that are there, and then it's us. And it's like, wow.
It opened a lot of doors for us.
I felt really out of place, but at the same time, I've never felt more welcome amongst people. It was really weird. And I mean, I go to cons, it's like we're all nerds. We become family within 2 minutes, or we become, we get into a feud, which is, again, we're like family within 10 minutes. But
yeah. Yep.
just the whole situation, and it was like that first year was this whirlwind of everything. And of course, you're meeting people who you've only heard as voices on the air for years, Memphis legacy, broadcasters.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh my goodness, it's like I'm now amongst these people. It's like the first time after getting published when Alan's writers people dragged me to lunch.
What was interesting about that first year too is the fact that in terms of time, because folks, I'm sure if you're listening to Geek Tank now, you notice, okay, there's some music that plays, then we do a segment, then they'll play more music. Right. Well, so it limits our time, and then even on other stations, there's commercial breaks and stuff. But when we owned that hour, we were able to cram a lot into that hour because we weren't having news breaks and commercial breaks. And we wrote gags. We had really big celebrity interviews. I mean, I think one of my favorite interviews we ever did was with John Delancey from Star Trek. That was almost a 2 that was like a 2-hour conversation.
Right.
We had to break it into,
which was hilarious because when we're talking to him before getting on the air, he's like, well, I've got to go do this thing, and I can give you maybe 15 minutes. And it's like, well, we'll take what we can. And then once you got him started, he didn't want to stop because we were asking him. Most people were asking him questions like, so what was it like to play Q in this episode, and what would you have actually done if you had gotten a chance to? And he gets those kind of questions. We wanted to know what got him started in acting. We hit from the ground up. We didn't just go, I like you as Discord and My Little Pony.
He was talking about the fact that he grew up and he had serious learning disabilities. Like he had to almost go to a special school or something. And it was one of those, but he found a lifeline by acting, and suddenly that transformed his whole life and everything. Yeah. And then we learned a lot about Juilliard. He said, well, basically I went to Juilliard, and I had to spend about 6 years unlearning everything I just learned. Right. Because it was not at all practical for making a living.
Well, have you ever noticed?
I'm like, that's pretty interesting.
I'm gonna say something, and then I've got to step out, so Alan's going to have to hold until I get back. But have you ever noticed that the most famous and prosperous comedians are people who got thrown out of Juilliard? Like Robin Williams, stuff like that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wonder what are they learning there?
Right. Alan, tag in while I run and get water.
Well, you go run and get your water, and I'm going to say what you discover is your reality versus your training. You've got to be trained.
There's the real world, and then there's
all right. Well, Joe, you're a carpenter,
right?
And you went to shop classes and all that kind of stuff. However, how much of that stuff did you actually do on a job site?
Right.
You may use the same equipment, but it's how you use it. It's where you use it. It's when you get into it. And those are also your acting and speaking skills and response to a dynamic, fluid business.
Right.
We're in radio. We're sitting here chatting. We're also on podcast. We're also all around the world.
Yeah.
I'd like to say hello to Thailand. We have a new one.
Did they chime in now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We got Thailand. We got New Zealand. We got Australia. We've got Canada. We got people listening to us in Romania.
There you go.
I mean, come on, guys.
That's what's fun about technology.
I write vampire novels. Romania. Hey, guys, send me an email. And that's the amazing thing about having been on the air all these years. I still run into people that listened 5 years ago or listened on a different station or listened to us via podcast, or now they can find us on Spotify and YouTube. And it's just plain fun when you meet somebody, at a convention we were just at a couple of weeks ago. I'm at the end of a hallway chatting it up and yucking it up with a couple of our cartoonist buddies.
Right.
And people came down the hall because they heard my voice.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
They didn't know. They just heard a familiar voice that he listens to every Saturday morning because that's when he gets off work. So he listens to us on his way home. And another thing that I run into, especially on 98.1 The Max, is I also do the Nerding at 9 on Mondays and Fridays.
Right.
And the things I get called out on because of the things I did to them. Because we talk about, whatever topic they want to talk about. But the biggest one lately with Danny was I introduced her to the fish doorbell.
Oh, no.
Okay.
And it's just a website in the Netherlands. If you want to see it, Google fish doorbell. It'll come up.
Right.
I cannot pronounce the name of this city. But it's a fish ladder. If fish come upstream and want to get over the bridge, get through the dam, somebody has to open this gate that lets them swim through.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to keep out invasive species, right? Right. But they put a camera down there so that you can sit there and watch for the fish. And I totally tanked Danny's last 2 weeks.
Yeah, because that's all she wants to talk about.
That is, she has the 2 or 3 monitors up, and one of them is a fish camera.
Oh, yeah, checking that out.
And then, every time something moves by that camera, Danny completely loses her train of thought.
Yeah, because love Danny to death, but she has squirrel-itis.
Well,
she sees something, she's going to chase it.
Oh,
so, yeah.
But the cool thing is we get called out for that, which means people are listening, people are paying attention.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how we ended up over at 98.1, is that Danny saw something shiny over at 98.9 and said, mine.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, too, because one thing I remember very specifically when we even pitched this to the first radio station, they're like, well, are you going to have enough to talk about? It's like, does that ever, because you think geek stuff, it's like, well, if there's not a new movie or TV show, that's not, but we're talking science. We're talking, one of my favorite segments, the Random Roundup.
Oh,
and even music is, it's a pop culture show.
I don't know if you guys touched on this while I was out of the kitchen, but I miss doing things like when we were fully digital, and we were doing things like Conspiracy Nation, where we would make up conspiracies and just roll with them.
That was my favorite, but you need Brody for that.
Well, Brody played off it so much because Brody could make you make what's really, you would go in with an idea, and Brody would play off of it so badly, so well, so just, oh my God, really, that you almost started to believe your own conspiracy, knowing it was fake. Because he would roll with it. It was so much fun.
It was kind of a spoof on the great Art Bell,
right?
Because we were rolling that way.
As much as we stay rooted in things like pop culture and science and everything, all three of us have a bit of a showman in us, and we would
Alan, no, okay,
and we love. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so critical of media nowadays is that the three of us love to entertain people. We just do. And so when we see something that...
I sure don't want to lecture people or put people off and trigger people. I don't want to do that.
It's like we may not agree with each other on the premise, and we may even get heated sometimes in our arguments about something, but when it comes down to it, I want you to love what you love, and unabashedly. As long as you're not hurting anybody or yourself, love what you love.
Yeah. Yeah, don't be phony about it. So, but it's interesting how much, I'll tell you this, I've learned, and I'm sure listeners have learned, you get a sort of unintended education on this show, too. I'm thinking a lot of the science stories and even a lot of the Random Roundup and a lot of just, it's actually sort of educational, We've made, I've learned about space science in terms of, Alan has taught us that at this period in history right now, we're going through the dirty part of the galaxy, which means a lot more meteors and asteroids and stuff. There's things we can run into, which is maybe why there's so much celestial phenomenon going on right now, right? I mean,
well, it's welcome to paying attention to your neighborhood,
right?
Yeah, I mean, we're part of a galactic situation here. We're not just local.
Well, when you look at the news, and it's not relatable. Seriously, somebody can talk about they just found some kind of gigantic new organic molecule on Mars. Well, that doesn't mean anything to you until somebody goes, well, let me tell you what I think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you what I think could have happened. We have a comet goes by. The comet has been dubbed by the researchers the party comet. Why? Because it's got alcohol coming off of it.
It produces alcohol, and that's
that
what
means
the tail
life.
is.
But that means life. That means E.T. Not only does E.T. exist, E.T. parties.
Now what if it crashes into a lake? Would the fish get drunk, or would it vaporize them?
Well,
or would it?
Here's the thing, Joe. What happened when that party comet showed up? Oh, I don't know, 3 billion years ago.
Things got really cold.
Hit a planet that was just now cooling off. Yeah, it might be where we came from.
Yeah. Well,
so
it's definitely where frat boys came from.
Yeah.
And possibly Alan. He might have been there at the time.
But you have fun with just asking what if.
But here's the thing. I'm wondering if our show would have survived. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, we know this. I'm sorry. The Last Jedi was a transformative moment in YouTube for sure, but it was a transformative moment in geekdom from the sense of everybody was expecting this big, huge, whether you like the movie or not, it definitely disrupted things in Star Wars. Well, suddenly there's people that came along, and instead of posting 3 or 4 videos about how much they didn't like The Last Jedi, they basically built an entire career about now making a YouTube channel all about the things they hate.
Right.
Which we've never done. We've never fallen victim to that, because I came on, I said, I didn't like it. And I even did my own little purge where I said, this is how I would have wrote it, and I got it out of my system and moved along.
Right.
But, it's like, so we've avoided the trap of just going negative, I think.
As much as I've always been like, well, we need to bring in a younger voice, we need to bring in a female voice, we need to bring in a more diverse voice. The three of us also, we grew up, there's 10 years apart from each of us?
Roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point. Yeah.
So, but we all grew up in a time where you weren't entitled to anything. So when things changed, most of the time it's like if comics changed to a point where I didn't like them, that's when I stopped collecting comics. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure, Joe, that was the same with you. Alan,
I stopped when my kids were born because I couldn't afford it.
Right. Alan, I'm sure that you stopped, gazing at wall carvings about that same time. But we get, and I give Alan grief, but I mean, he's really not that much older. He's just been there. But, there's a generational gap where at some point people decided that our entertainment had to grow with us as opposed to us outgrowing it. But meanwhile, I could still enjoy the stuff I loved as a kid. And I didn't need Batman and the Avengers to get adult. I didn't need, what they put on the screen about Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi made sense to me because I had basically started to feel that way about geekdom.
Now that's interesting.
In a moment, it's like I wasn't some, PTS-driven, hermit who wanted to be away from everybody and everything that I loved because I was afraid how it was affecting me. But I had gotten to that point where if I had one more person come to me and talk about how, a certain, version of the Ninja Turtles was so much better than this, but then meanwhile the stuff I liked sucked, I was going to yeet them into the sun.
Well, it started turning into two camps. Like, okay, you're either pro this or anti that. It's like, well, why does it have to be that way? Yeah. Why can't you just,
And I mean, and I'll blame the internet for a lot of it because of the fact that, it's like I was an original trilogy guy. And my only problem with the prequels was the fact they were too clean. But I had enough friends who hated the prequels, hated them with a fiery passion. And then I've got friends who, who are younger than me who, the prequels were their jam, and they hate the Disney stuff because of, what it did. And I'm one of those guys who I will give every piece of Star Wars you throw at me a good chance. If I don't like it, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Because
there's some Disney Star Wars I hate, and then there's some that it's some of my favorites. So it's a mixed bag. It's just, it's how anything is.
But, we've managed to stay positive, for the most part, we've managed to stay positive in a geekdom that now is like, it's all divisive. But I mean, society, it's all reflected because society is just as divisive about pretty much anything. I'm sitting here drinking a bottle of water, and I'm sure there's somebody who says that I'm a horrible person and I'm destroying the environment, even though I have a recyclable bottle that's been recycled already. But because I'm not using a stainless steel tumbler, It's just, I don't get it, man. Just let people like what they like as long as they're not hurting anybody.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have a favorite memory of the last 10 years? Because in terms of, it doesn't even have to be a segment. It could just be anything or a guest.
Honestly, it's a behind-the-scenes moment. This was after Brody had stolen us from on air and we'd gone full digital.
Yeah.
And we had gotten to the point where we were putting on like 3 hours worth of show in various segments, and we were putting everything. And we were in the middle of recording something, and the board went out. and Brody's like, all right, hold on, give me a minute. And he goes off, and we're all just sitting there, do. In the studio, we were allowed to decorate, which always made the energy even more fun.
Oh, yeah.
Good old Brian J. comes walking in there with a big rubber mallet, walks over, hits the bottom of the table 3 times, and everything worked perfectly.
Poor Brian J.
He just looked at me and he goes, percussive maintenance, and walked out.
Okay.
That's the only words. And I mean, that memory will live in my brain forever.
Okay.
It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's one of those that it's how I feel about this show.
Yeah.
It's like when we hit that crossroad where it's like, all we got to do is hit it with a hammer.
Yeah. What about you, Alan? Because I have 2 that are definitely my favorite.
I've enjoyed the interviews we've done. We've met some pretty amazing people. I also enjoyed, basically entertaining and at the same time torturing my lovely co-host with Geek Eats. That would be feeding Brandon and torturing Joe.
Yeah, I just never liked that segment, but and I'm honest. Hey, we're being honest. We're brutally honest.
He was always honest about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's
well, I don't like to hear somebody chew on the air.
Yeah, well,
that's typically why we move the mics away from us when we're doing that.
Oh, you'd hear it, but okay.
No, that
certainly explains why I have several cooking shows on the radio, Joe.
Yeah,
but watching you recoil in horror as I went, well, you wanted me to make porg, so I made porgs.
Yeah,
we got fed bunnies.
Yep. You got fed all kinds of cool and interesting things, but. Yeah, the interviews were fun. Overall, it's just been, just kind of the experience. You kind of walk in every week and kind of go, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Have you seen this trailer? Did you see what so-and-so did? And it actually makes you look forward to some of the projects.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now we, and those are some of the things where we've evolved over the years, too, is I remember when we felt like it was a duty that we had to go see everything. And then content got to the point where there was entirely too much all at once. And everybody else was already reviewing it before we got on the air. So it was kind of like, all right, did anybody see the latest, whatever movie? And it's like, no. Well, I don't know when that happened, but I do like the fact that we've still been able to stay on topic and focused. It just, I think, shows our evolution as broadcasters.
There you go. So, well, I liked a lot of our old gag. Well, okay, for one thing, I don't know where we could dig those up. The old Conspiracy Nation, I really did love those ones. But there was a very landmark moment in the last 10 years for me personally that you guys allowed me to discuss on the air, even though I don't think technically it was geeky. But it had to do with the Cubs finally winning the World Series. Well, and one of my favorite segments was I put a lot of effort into this, and I talked about the numerical symbolism associated with the Cubs, and it was before the World Series happened. It was during the playoffs, and I predicted based on these numerical calculations and how many stitches are on a baseball and all this other stuff, why they were destined to win the World Series and why it was going to trigger the collapse of Vladimir Putin's regime and all this other stuff.
Well, Joe, what year was that?
It was 2016.
Exactly. Not only did you predicted them winning the series, but you were completely on the wrong track with everything else. But
it was a pretty tough year. But that was a fun segment.
You can't use numerology to do something and not consider it geeky.
Well, yeah.
It may be hoodoo geeky, but it's still geeky.
And they won, and it was exciting. But then also, I do remember...
But it was the downfall of the Cubs afterwards.
Well, they haven't, anyway. But, hey, you guys, do you remember the the 4th of July show of 2015, because we were only on the air at that point for 3 months. And I'll never forget, after it was over, you guys said, we're never doing that again.
That's because
we had like 6 guests.
We had 17 people on the mic at once, and the ones who kept taking over couldn't talk.
But here's the thing. In the heart of that, there were some really good little nuggets. So basically, folks, we're like, let's do a show that's patriotic and geeky at the same time.
Right.
So one of the things we did is we found a World War II, of a classmate of mine from high school. Her dad was a Navy fighter. He was on all these battleships and stuff during World War II, and he was still alive.
Yeah.
And we did what was his name? Anyway, I'm sorry. Melissa Vincent is my friend's name. But anyway, remember that? He was great because we said, let's find out, because he also was a fan of the Batman comics, and he was there right when they came out. And that was a really fun interview. He was hilarious. Yeah. He was talking about his experience, and he was sharp as a tack. But there was one other interview we did, and it was with Dr. Cord Scott. I remember this specifically, and he had written his doctoral thesis on Captain America.
Which is awesome.
And he was a great interview, but in the midst of that was one of my favorite characters that was only around for a short while, which was Dr. Judge Mentor. I'm sorry. He was a fun guest.
I'm sorry. You had
your Geek Eats. I had Dr. Judge Mentor, so... Those are funny.
Both of them resulted in acid reflux.
Dr. Judge Mentor thought we were all idiots, and he was happy to get on the air and talk about how messed up we were, and
geek mental illnesses, which were always fun. A lot of the
he was a geek psychologist.
Right, a lot of the gags. Do you remember the name of the place that he worked?
Oh gosh, what was it?
I don't remember. That's the thing. It's like.
He wrote a whole doctoral thesis on all sorts of geek maladies that affect people. Like he would go anyway. But he was one of my favorites. But first year we had a lot of really original ideas.
Lots of gags, lots of jokes. We were very college radio at the time. Now we're still pretty college radio because I don't think we have a single rejoiner that is a positive message about Geek Tank. I know that you get a giggle out of them, Joe, but when you actually listen to them on 98.1 The Max, you get commercial that rejoins 98.1 The Max, then a 98.1 The Max that rejoins Geek Tank, then a Geek Tank that rejoins Geek Tank, and then a rejoiner. And I'm just like, there's too many rejoiners. Something's got to go.
Well, I'm just amazed we've survived 10 years in the midst of all the turbulence in the world of geekdom. Because, convention attendant. We do run a convention, folks, the Memphis Comic and Fantasy Convention. That landscape has totally changed.
Yep.
Movies have changed. We have streaming services that really didn't,
I always think back, and it eventually made us stronger when we came back together. But I remember the fallout from when the old studio that we worked for was going fully digital. And we had to basically get out of there before they laid claim to Geek Tank. And
we've seen the radio landscape change.
And we kind of ended up with only like a handful of weeks where we could do Geek Tank before COVID became a thing. And
that's true.
You were in your place. I was I was doing Radio Free GTR, which because we had no connection to the radio, and I was doing that with Brody and Wayne and Ariana Geneva and Allie Diggs, and we were all in our living rooms with our microphones strapped to our head, on Zoom, and it was just there was that moment where it was like, this is dying. I was not having fun. There was nothing to be excited about. And then we got a chance after lockdown where the three of us got together to do the show under a different name, but it was still us. And it's like the energy just came back like we'd never been apart.
Yeah.
And then Alan went into a 2-week coma and tried to leave us.
I don't remember that, but
neither do I.
Well, no, it was.
Hello, COVID.
There was a show that I used to love. I don't know if Alan's going to roll his eyes, but there was a show back in the 80s called 30-something.
Yeah.
I love that show. And there was a guy called Miles Drentel, and he was a really great boss. Like he was great from the sense of he was sort of this evil not evil, but he was just whatever.
It's
but
like
he had
working with Alan.
He had this same, because like these guys would work for him, then they would go start their own business, then they'd come back and work for him, and they kept somehow getting back in each other's lives. And he talked about, he said it's gravity. All of us have fields around us. Some are just stronger than others. And it seems like it's interesting the fact that there's a million ways this show should have just died years ago, or should have just faded away. But it's interesting when you find that you just keep getting drawn back into something, and maybe that, I don't know, maybe it's a sign that you're supposed to do it.
Well,
I guess. It's still fun for me.
It's like it's like I'm sure that there's some people out there that don't realize that this whole thing started because the three of us don't know how to shut up, and we were sitting around in the lobby of the Hilton, and we would talk. After every convention, be Mid-South Con, MCFC, Anime Blues, didn't matter. The three of us ended up in the midst of conversations, and I think that's one of the reasons why we stay strong here. Other voices come in and go, but the three of us have this weird chemistry that just keeps us going. And whether our conversations be scientific, whether it be nerdy, or whether it be philosophical, I think that the three of us could talk for hours and not ever really get tired.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's true, because there's sometimes, let's be honest, we had a couple guests that we're not going to name that 10 minutes that we interviewed them felt like 3 hours. It's like you had to keep telling them to get back on the mic, and could you talk louder, and could you...
but see, you mentioned that, and then I immediately start thinking about, the various people who come in to do promotional stuff, and watching how they've evolved over the years, and seeing people like when Denise came in a couple of weeks ago for Mid-South Con, and she used to be so nervous on the mic. She was,
she's smooth.
She's so smooth now. Same thing with Jessie Gaston.
She's great.
When the first time she came in, she was a little hesitant, but Jessie always commands the room whenever she's there. And, now she gets on the mic, and you'd think that she'd been in the studio with us every week leading up to it.
Yeah.
Jesse McAllister, Alexander, I'm sorry. Who
I always call her McAllister, too.
Yeah. Well, it's because, she's Jessie Mac, It's
right.
She was our con mom, It's like she came in and she told it, gave us stuff from the different perspective. And she started off as a salesperson with one of the, stations we were with. And, when she first came on the air, it's like she didn't want to release her full geekdom. Then the last time we actually had her on the air, and it's been a couple years, and I kind of want to bring her back in eventually soon. And she just, it was like she'd never stopped.
Yeah. I got something random, not to turn the corner, but you're making me think of something, because I don't know if you or Alan said it, but it was like, well, radio, okay, radio is different than it was. Let's face it, radio 30 years ago was the bomb. That's what it. But being on Geek Tank gave us some opportunities, or gave us some access, and gave me an insight on things that I didn't have before. For example, because we do this, a lot of people would because we had, we've always been at a place where there's 3 or 4 stations. So before we would have Rock 103 across the hallway, and then we had different stations. Right. Well, as a result of that, a lot of guests would just show up out of nowhere. I remember coming in one morning, and Sinbad was there. Yeah. He's just sitting in and I'm like, so I got a great picture, got his autograph and everything, but I'm like, he doesn't look the same when you see him in person. And then I walked past a guy, this little curmudgeon-y guy, just sitting in the lobby, and I said, hey, is anybody helping you? He goes, yeah, they're going to be out in a minute. They're going to help me. I go, oh, okay, thanks, man. 20 minutes later, I found out it was Gilbert Gottfried. In person, he looks nothing. I'm like, right. I didn't even get that. And then as a result, because of the stuff we do, sometimes you see people who are famous in person. Yeah. And they don't look Carrie Fisher walked past me at Dragon Con when she, back. Yeah. didn't even know that was her. So, like, it's interesting when you see people in real life versus
right.
television or what they looked like 30 years ago or something. And that all came about by doing this show.
You know, I thought the story about Gilbert Godfrey was going to go a different direction.
What?
I see this, guy, curmudgeon-y guy, and I asked if anybody, and that's how I met Alan Gilbert.
Yeah. No, he was friendly, but he was just, I'm looking directly at him, and I didn't know it was Gilbert Godfrey.
Because he kind of gives you, when he's just there, he's just kind of gives you that squinted, brow,
And he was small.
Yeah, he's a little dude.
And I was like, but even Sinbad, I'm like, you look different than you did in the movies.
I miss when Sinbad used to be a regular at the various comedy clubs around Memphis, because you'd run into him anywhere. I remember running into him at the Peabody place long before I was running around with you guys.
Yeah.
And we were he was coming through as me and a friend of mine were headed to the Putting Edge, which was a cosmic putt-putt inside Peabody place.
Right.
But it's just it's things like that, and things like living in Memphis where you never knew what celebrity you were going to run into anyway. Because this used to be a haven, it's like they come here with their family. It kind of still is quietly.
Right. There's a lot of people that show up and they don't announce it.
Yeah.
They don't. Like Rob Lowe is coming to town. Robert Plant's here all the time.
Right.
People like that.
It's like, and I think that's one of the reasons why when we do the conventions, and whether it be a convention that's got super famous people, or it's us grabbing auteur people that right before they get famous, like when we got David Desmalchin, it's like. He was on MacGyver as Murdoch. He'd done the Ant-Man movies at that point, but his star we've gotten to watch his star rise as friends, as opposed to this was a guy we met one time, because he's always just fully on cordial, and he remembers the fact that he remembers that we've got a barbecue challenge for him,
Yeah. So I mean, I real quick, let's give a shout out to let's see. Chance Raspberry, J. Michael Tatum, John Delancey, Lowell Tolhurst, who's the founding member of The Cure. We interviewed him. We interviewed, we didn't do a political interview, but I did interview Ted Cruz during the height of the...
you interviewed Ted Cruz at the height of the the 2016 Republican primary, just in time to talk about his campaign getting attacked by vampires in True Blood.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about politics.
There was
we talked
no politics.
about geek
it was
stuff,
about nerd stuff,
which I think is good, because people even obviously there's people that would vote for him, people that wouldn't, but we didn't talk about that. We talked about universal things. Who else have we've interviewed quite a number. Dave Dasmalchin, of course. Greg Brewer.
David's such a good. But Greg Brewer is
Phil
amazing.
Hendry. I got to finally interview.
You got to meet Phil Hendry. I know it was it's like. I think about the people that we've met and through the conventions, through this, it's like, I still want to get Tom Kenny on Geek Tank. It's like, it's this obsessive need.
If you go back to the very first episode here on, when we were on 98.9 The Roar,
Joel Hodgson.
Interviews Joel Hodgson and Wayne White.
Right.
Who else are we forgetting? I know we're forgetting people.
We're forgetting people because it...
Jeremy Shada, he's a good voice actor.
When you've done this for 10 years, it's like they start to add up, and it's like at no point have I ever felt like we were just interviewing somebody as a promotion for anything. I always felt like we were just having a conversation with them. It's always been very comfortable.
I know another one that I loved. We did an interview and talk about not doing politics. We interviewed I can't remember what his title was, but was he a city councilman or something? And he took his oath of office holding the Captain America shield. What was his name? He was out. That was pretty fun.
Was that Ted Lieu?
I don't know.
You'll have to look it up.
Well, you guys, we could be here for hours talking about this.
But I mean, here's the thing: we've got this, and it's something that I love. I love the idea of sharing this, little intimate behind the scenes moment with our audience, because honestly, without them, we don't have any of this.
No, exactly.
Because we could be speaking into the ether in our own backyard. And
I get texts every now and again from people that are like, "Hey, I was listening to you the other morning," and that one of the reasons I think doing radio is fun is because I think the worst thing in the world would be to be famous. There is nothing about that appealing to me. But you can do radio, even if maybe a lot of people are listening. You can still go to the Kroger and nobody bothers you. Nobody,
You say that, but then you go somewhere with Alan. And Alan doesn't know how to talk quiet.
Yeah, but Alan likes the attention. Let's face it. I mean,
yeah, but as soon as
you'd love to be famous.
But
Alan,
here's the thing:
so, I mean,
he is famous, and if you know him and you're out there with him, he doesn't take any chance of them not realizing that you deserve that attention too, because he will immediately introduce you as
I don't want it. I could care less. But anyway,
well,
I just like to do things that sound good, and if you listen, we appreciate you.
Well,
so,
I mean, and after 10 years of practice, hopefully someday you will.
Yeah. All right, you guys. Well, I don't know, man. I'm not trying to sign off here because that's definitely your department. But you guys, I don't know. Who knows what the next 10 years are going to bring in the world of geekdom and in pop culture? Who knows how they'll be listening 10 years from now? Are we going to have chips in our head that'll? I hope not.
Only if Timu Lex Luthor up in Washington gets his way.
I'm already scheduled to be, downloaded and replaced by AI. So
okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. But
Chat GPT, the G stands for Gilbreth.
Yeah,
there you go. So, all right, you guys. Well, hey, happy anniversary, and it's been a lot of fun. And everybody out there, thank you for listening, and thanks for indulging us today because it is cool. I mean, it is good to look back on this.
It really is. I mean, and every so often maybe we should take a moment to just look back on what we did.
Yeah.
Bring in an old friend and berate them on the radio.
I think it's time to bring back some of those things. So, but let's get out of here, you guys.
You convince people to give us more than 32 minutes on air.
There you go. All right, well, let's get out of here. So until next week, we are the Geek Patrol, and I am Joe Thorderson.
I'm Alan Gilbreth.
And I am Brandon Olmstead, signing off for another 10 years.
Woo! Let me guess. 58 minutes. How long was that?
50.
No, I mean, did you time it on there?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, listen to that ringing. So we're finally getting it.
See, I was wanting to keep talking until I couldn't hear that anymore. But who knows when that'll stop.
5.
Well, I guess it is a good day to do taxes.
Oh, you might want to hit stop on the recording before you export it.
Oh.